Hey guys, welcome on into my pitch for a Venom solo game. I and many other people think an Insomniac Venom game is highly likely. Spoilers for Spider-Man 2, but we did get to play as Venom for 2 missions, and it'd be a shame if they spent hours making Venom a playable character only for them to toss it out and never use it again. This Venom solo game would be around the same time span as Spider-Man Miles Morales, so around 8 hours of story and about 3 hours worth of side missions. This game would be advertised and marketed as a Venom solo game, but it would also serve as sort of a Spider-Man 2.5. Now that we got the details aside, let's jump into it. The story takes place a year after the events of Spider-Man 2. This game would open up with Harry Osborn awakening up from his coma. He may be awake, but he is still dying. Norman Osborn, Peter Parker, and Dr. Carnage do everything they can to make an antidote for Harry, but nothing is working. Norman eventually decides to use a specific treatment on Harry called the Goblin Serum. Peter doesn't like this and he believes the serum is dangerous. He begs Norman not to use it, but Norman says he's Harry's father, and so Peter has no say in it. The two characters argue and Peter ultimately decides to go his separate ways with Norman. Peter gets to talking with MJ and they find out a couple of major investors want to invest in the Emily May Foundation. The investors want to meet Peter in person in the UK, so Peter and MJ leave New York for a while. Norman asks Connors if they still have the symbiote, because he knows the Goblin symbiote won't work. Connors says no, not again, absolutely not. Norman says that when Harry first had the symbiote, it was the best he had ever seen him in his life. Everything worked great for the symbiote until Spider-Man intervened. Connors still refuses, so Norman blackmails him by saying he will turn Connors into prison. Connors is wanted by the police after he caused mayhem in New York during the events of Spider-Man 2. We all know that. Connors agrees because he knows he has no other choice. He pulls out the last specimen he has from his lab. He begins to do some tests and he figures out that he can control the symbiote and get rid of its violent thoughts. He continues to experiment on the symbiote and makes it safe. After a while, Harry is given the new and improved symbiote, which eventually cures him. We then cut to a new character in the Insomniac universe named Eddie Brock, which we all know, but it'd be new in the Insomniac world. Eddie has just moved to New York after living in San Francisco all his life. He has moved to the Big Apple because he had just got a new high-paying job as a photographer/journalist for the Daily Bugle. His first assignment is to find out more about a famous criminal codenamed The Flame, who we all know as Carnage. Eddie does some digging and finally tracks down The Flame. He basically stalks him and gets to know more information about him. He finds out that The Flame's real birth name is Cletus Cassidy. He also discovers that Cletus killed his mother and grandma when he was just 8 years old. He was put in a mental hospital called the Ravencroft Institute, but he was let out when he was 18. Ever since that, he has caused chaos around New York and even formed a cult. Eventually, Cletus finds out about Eddie and he becomes furious. Cletus turns into Carnage and is about to kill Eddie until Miles Morales enters and saves Eddie. Miles Morales and Carnage have a huge battle. Miles becomes pretty injured, but he eventually rips the symbiote off of Cletus and he apprehends him. Miles tells Eddie to not snoop into serial killers' lives again. Eddie agrees and the two go their separate ways. Cletus' symbiote then lashes onto Eddie, but Eddie doesn't realize it. We cut back to Harry, who is now feeling absolutely great. He spends some time with his dad and does all sorts of fun things he wasn't able to previously do. Norman and Harry are walking out of a cafe late at night until a person with a gun confronts them. The criminal says he knows Harry Osborn was Venom and that Harry killed his dad when Venom went on a killing spree at Oscorp a while back. The criminal shoots Harry, but the symbiote transforms him into Agent Venom. Yes, I know Agent Venom is Flash Thompson, but in this game, it's Harry Osborn. Harry deflects the bullet and doesn't even fight the criminal. He says he's sorry about his father and that he wasn't in the right state of mind at the time. The criminal then walks away. Harry cries to his dad and tells him that his life will never be the same and that all he wanted to do was cure the world. Norman suggests that maybe he should call Peter and see how things are going with the Emily May Foundation. Norman leaves and Harry pulls out his phone. He looks at Peter's contact info, but he knows that him and Peter's relationship won't be the same after the events of the last game. We cut to Miles, who is now in college. He's doing good in school and has a good relationship with his girlfriend Haley. He approves of his mom's new boyfriend, and he also bonds with his stepsister Cindy Moon. No, not in that way. Crime is now also at an all-time low. Miles peeks above his room and notices a bunch of loud clanging. He swings down to the alleyway and he sees Eddie trying to pull the Venom suit off of himself. Miles tells Eddie that it's okay and that he has good loud sound mixers that will kill the symbiote. Eddie tells him to hurry, but Venom takes over and says, "It's good to be back." That was really bad, I'm sorry. Venom jumps away and starts causing chaos. Miles chases him through the city and the two fight each other. Venom beats the crap out of Miles until Agent Venom enters and helps Miles out. The two battle Venom and confront him. Eddie says he has no idea how he got these powers and how he's now only listening to his vulgar, violent thoughts in his head as a way of survival. Yes, there is two Venoms in this story. Harry Osborn is Agent Venom, and Eddie Brock is just the regular Venom. Agent Venom takes Eddie back to his lab. They come to the conclusion that Cletus' symbiote lashed onto Eddie. Eddie reports back to the Daily Bugle and tells J. Jonah about his experience. Jonah doesn't care, and he is only worried about what the new headline story will be for this week, now that they don't have the Flame one. Eddie says to give him a day to find a story. J. Jonah Jameson gives him 10 hours instead. Eddie gets annoyed and goes home to his house to relax. His girlfriend recently came in from San Francisco and is preparing to move in with him. Eddie's girlfriend is Gwen Stacy. Yes, I know Gwen doesn't date Eddie in most iterations of Spider-Man media, but Insomniac loves to switch things up, so we're going to stick with it. We are now introduced to a man named Trevor Cole, who is the CEO of an organization named Alchemax. Yes, I know Alchemax is primarily a company that only exists within the Spider-Man 2099's timeline. I think it was in the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movies. I think Alchemax wasn't that. But like I said, we're changing things up. So I would have used Roxxon, but we've already seen that storyline. Alchemax is known to the public as a chemical plastic maker and provider, although it's really an organization that experiments on humans in order to make them superhuman. They tried to replicate a radioactive spider on multiple occasions, but failed. They even tried to replicate familiar villains' powers such as the Lizard, Electro, Mr. Negative, and more. They have all sorts of cages that house individuals that are failed experiments. We see a female who's half lizard and half human, which was obviously a failed replication of Lizard. We also see a man who's fully white with a couple of black spots around his body, who is a failed version of Mr. Negative. Obviously this character is Spot, but we haven't got there yet. We also see a man covered fully in fire, Molten Man. The final prisoner we see is a man fully covered in water, Hydro Man. We now see an employee of Alchemax who has a badge on her name that reads Liz Allen. Liz tells her boss, Trevor Cole, to look at something. She hands him a device and shows him the return of Venom. Trevor gets very excited when he sees this, as him and his company have been trying to track down the symbiote for years. Most of it was destroyed after the events of Spider-Man 2. They don't have to do any special science to turn into Venom. All they have to do is apprehend the symbiote. Trevor tells Liz to go find out who these new versions of Venom are so that they can kill them. Liz tells him that Harry Osborn could possibly still be one of the Venoms, considering his past. Trevor says that's a good point and to go kill him once and for all. We cut back to Eddie, who is doing some research. He eventually comes to find out about Alchemax. Miles texts him and says they need to get the symbiote off of him, but he ignores it. He finds out that Alchemax is producing plastics that aren't good for the environment, and that they are the #1 building in New York that is polluting the air. He plans to interview the CEO tomorrow, and he settles down for bed with Gwen. We cut to Harry Osborn, who is simply doing some science in his room. He struggles figuring out a chemistry equation and is about to call Peter for help until a concussion blast is thrown through his window. A ton of Alchemax guards come to kill Harry. Harry suits up as Agent Venom and begins to destroy everyone. He looks at his chemistry stuff and realizes that they destroyed it. He's about to kill the guards until he realizes that he has to stay vigilant and not become his older former self. He screams at them to leave and all the guards fold away. We cut back to Eddie Brock, who is now going to interview the CEO of Alchemax. He kisses Gwen goodbye and leaves for work. He goes to the Daily Bugle to tell J. Jonah about his plan. Jonah says the project was due 6 hours ago and that he doesn't want to publish a controversial article about a good American company. Eddie begs him to let him go through with his story. Betty Brant tells J. Jonah that they have no other choice and that they have to publish an article in 4 hours. J. Jonah says he has one shot, but if he messes it up, he's fired. Eddie thanks him and proceeds to go to Alchemax. Eddie enters the facility and sees them creating plastic. Lots of smoke appears and he has trouble breathing. A guard eventually notices him and asks him where his employer badge is at. Eddie says that he's a news reporter and that he'd like to talk to the CEO. The guard asks him to leave, but Eddie refuses. The guard pins him down and handcuffs him. Eddie turns into Venom and kills the guard. A bunch of other guards come on to fight Venom, but Venom comes out on top. A bloodied and injured guard tells Trevor Cole about the situation. Trevor says that they can't lose Venom and to shut down all the perimeters. But sir, we have no more troops, the guard says. Venom then kills him. Trevor confronts Molten Man and tells him that he has an opportunity for him. Molten Man asks what it is. Trevor says that if he successfully takes down Venom, then he will let him go scot-free. Molten Man smiles. We cut back to Venom, who continues to kill guards. Molten Man enters and begins to attack Venom, and the two battle it out. Venom can't take the heat, but he still puts in everything he has. Venom wins and is able to kill him, although he passes out due to all the excessive heat. Trevor enters and injects sleeping medicine into Eddie. Trevor takes the symbiote off of him and puts it in a safe containment container. Eddie is now strapped to an electric constrainment. Trevor antagonizes him and thanks him for bringing the symbiote right to him. Trevor continues to experiment on it. If you let me go, I won't tell anyone about Alchemax, I swear, Eddie says. Trevor says, nah, there's still small specks of the symbiote left in you, and I need it. Plus, when I do get all that, it will basically rip your body apart in order to get it all out of your system, Trevor says as he smiles away. We cut back to Harry, who is talking to Miles about what had happened to him earlier. Miles says he's sorry that happened and that he'll be on the lookout going forward. The two characters then scream in agony as they hear a high-pitched scream fading towards them. This Harry symbiote can't take the noise, but he toughens through it. Miles looks through a window and sees that a girl is responsible for these loud-pitched screams. The two then proceed to swing towards her. The girl is revealed to be Shriek. Miles asks her what her problem is. Shriek says she's here to kill the spider for putting her husband in jail, Cletus Cassidy. Also, I did put Cletus Cassidy in jail, and I kind of sidelined him for this story because they're setting him up for more for Spider-Man 3, it seems like, than anything else. And besides, it'd be really cool to see Spider-Man and Carnage fight, so I'm going to save Carnage for Spider-Man 3. Agent Venom and Miles Morales then begin to fight her. The two win, and Shriek is taken to the Ravencroft Institute. Miles has a college class that he's late for, so he quickly swings away to his room to change clothes. Right when he gets there, Cindy Moon opens his door at a bad time and sees him taking off his mask. Cindy freaks out and becomes very excited. Miles isn't too happy about this, but he accepts it. He tells her the rules and specifically says do not tell anyone. Cindy says of course and that she will help him in any way she can. Also, Cindy is 16 years old and a junior in high school, so about 2 years younger than Miles. Miles gets a call from Harry and asks him if he's heard from Eddie lately. Miles says no, and the two start to get worried. We cut back to Eddie, who is in complete pain. He really needs Venom, but he no longer has the complete symbiote. He looks at the other prisoners in his lab and gets to talking to them. All of them form a plan to escape. The Spot says he has been growing more powerful lately, and Trevor hasn't noticed it. He tells them that he may be able to create a portal to Eddie's constraints that can unlock him. The Spot has trouble at first, but he is successful in his plan. Eddie unlocks the rest of the prisoners' chambers, and Eddie, the Spot, Hydra Man, and the Lizard Girl all escape. The four defeat some guards and are about to leave the facility until they hear a fearful sound. Trevor confronts them and tells them to get back in their cells immediately or else he will kill them. The Lizard Girl laughs and says that her stupid little guards aren't going to stop them. Trevor smiles and then turns into the symbiote Riot. Riot kills the Lizard Girl and he begins to fight everyone else. Eddie can't do much considering he doesn't have the symbiote, so Hydro Man and the Spot fight Riot. Riot eventually manages to kill the Spot. Eddie runs away because he knows he's next. Hydro Man distracts Riot and the two battle it out. Riot defeats Hydro Man by trapping him in a sewer. Riot screams and tells Eddie to reveal himself. He looks everywhere for Eddie, but he can't find him. Eddie was able to steal some crucial evidence against Alchemax, and he goes to the Daily Bugle. J. Jonah says that they missed their deadline and that their pure perfect streak of newspaper publishments ended. Eddie tells him about what happened. J. Jonah doesn't believe Eddie and tells him that he's fired. Eddie begs him not to fire him, but J. Jonah calls security to get him out of the building. Eddie gets furious and his arms turn into symbiote. He chokes J. Jonah and throws him across the building. He then leaves the building in anger, although he is shocked to see that he still has some of the symbiote left in him. I guess Trevor was right. I do still have some of the symbiote left in me, Eddie says. Eddie goes back to his house and tells Gwen about what happened. Gwen says she's sorry and that she'll support him in any way she can, but he needs to turn himself into the cops. Eddie gets mad and says he's not going to do that. Gwen tells him to get out and the two start to argue. Gwen kicks Eddie out of the house and he becomes angry once again. He goes to Danica Hart's podcast and makes her publish his article about Alchemax on her website. Danica refuses and Eddie begins to threaten her with the symbiote. Danica, who's frightened, publishes the article. Venom then leaves her studio and he goes to Alchemax to find Riot. Although on his way, he is stopped by Miles and Harry. Miles says he needs to calm down and talk to them. The symbiote is controlling you in a negative way. This isn't you, Harry says. Eddie says this is him and he turns fully back into Venom. Venom fights them and wins. Venom leaves and goes to Alchemax to fight Riot. Trevor sees Venom at the front door and asks his assistant Liz how Eddie was able to turn back into Venom. Liz says his symbiote DNA was able to replicate itself and reproduce due to the last bit of symbiote he had left in him. Venom and Riot then begin to fight. It's a tough battle, but Venom wins. We cut back to Miles and Harry who are trying to find a way to stop Venom. Miles creates a powerful sound mixer device similar to what he had in Spider-Man 2, although this device is even more powerful. Venom swings through the city and even fights a couple of cops. We now cut back to Venom. Eventually, we see a giant Hydra Man topple over New York. He begins to flood everything around him and he screams for Venom. Venom confronts him and asks him what he wants. Hydra Man says he's going to kill Venom for leaving him to die against Riot. Venom says whatever and bites Hydra Man. Venom is able to defeat him by smothering him with the symbiote. We cut back to Riot, who is now very angry. He begins to experiment on the symbiote and he finds out that he can replicate it using his science shit. He does it successfully and the symbiote tells him that all they need left is a host. We cut back to Miles again and Harry, who are trying to track down Venom, but they can't seem to find him. In the meantime, they go around New York helping civilians out of whirlpools that Hydra Man left behind. They clean up the city and Miles says he's going to go study for his midterms for a bit and asks Harry if he's okay with watching over the city. Harry says yes and Miles leaves. Miles spends some time with his girlfriend and he has dinner with his family. We cut back to Harry, who looks at a billboard and sees the Flames cult army trying to rescue their leader, Cletus Cassidy. Harry goes to the prison and defeats the rest of the Flames army. Harry doesn't see any more crimes, so he goes back to his home. He talks to his dad and his dad says he's glad Harry's doing better. The two hug but are interrupted as Norman is pulled violently away from Harry. We see Phage, who is holding him hostage. He proceeds to put a needle to Norman's neck. Harry throws his symbiote right at Phage, saving his father. The two then begin to fight. Agent Venom wins and Phage is barely alive as Agent Venom is very angry. Phage, with his last might, throws a needle straight at Norman. Norman gets stabbed in the chest. Phage quickly runs away, but Harry decides to take his dad to the hospital instead of running after Phage. Norman is successfully taken to the hospital but is immediately taken into the ICU. We cut back to Eddie, who is mad at himself for causing so much pain to everyone. He feels bad for Hydra Man and the Spot for leaving them behind to die. He also feels bad for letting down Harry and Miles, although he is most saddened by how things ended with Gwen. Eddie then calls Gwen and asks her if she wants to meet somewhere. Gwen agrees and the two talk things out at a cafe. Gwen eventually convinces Eddie to turn himself into the cops. Eddie and Gwen then leave the cafe and are about to go to the police station until Harry enters and asks for Eddie's help. We cut back to Riot, who just created a symbiote army. Phage reports back to him and tells him that he wasn't able to kill Agent Venom, although he did stab Norman Osborn. Riot gets angry and says he doesn't care about Norman. All he wanted was Harry for the symbiote. Riot beats the hell out of Phage and injects him with a new symbiote treatment that will make him more powerful. Riot turns back to his human form and calls a mysterious buyer. Trevor tells the buyer that he's giving up on trying to create different villains' powers because he has something greater for him, the symbiote. The buyer becomes angry and says that all he wanted was several different powers and not just one. Trevor says the symbiote is way more powerful than any other villain that Spider-Man's ever faced. The buyer says their business deal is done and that he's cutting their funding. Trevor begs him and he says he will do anything. The buyer says to give him the powers of Spider-Man, then they can talk. Trevor says he can make that happen and he ends the call. The next day, Riot sends out a new symbiote he created named Agony to go find Spider-Man. Blood. Agony swings through the city and sees Miles, and then she lashes at him. The two fight each other. Agony loses, but she injects Miles, taking his blood, and she runs off. Miles is injured pretty bad, so he can't chase after her. Miles calls Harry and says it's time to put the symbiotes to an end once and for all. We now cut to Cindy Moon, who is trying to find an article online to write for her informative essay for school. She stumbles across Eddie's article and finds it very intriguing. She knows this is the perfect article for her essay, but she just needs a little bit more information. She finds Eddie's number and calls him, but he doesn't pick up. So she takes the matters into her own hands, and she decides to go to Alchemax herself. She puts on an old Halloween costume similar to her silk costume in the comics, and she sneaks out of the house. She then uses some cash to call a taxi. The taxi takes her there, and she sneaks into Alchemax. She sees the harsh plastic being made, and she has trouble breathing while she walks around. She eventually passes out because she can't handle all the smoke. A man then finds her and picks her up. We now cut back to Miles, Harry, and Eddie, who are all forming a game plan. Eddie apologizes to him about earlier, and they all move on from it. Harry says it's okay, and that the symbiote can often make your thoughts violent. Eddie nods his head in acceptance. They all decide to go into Alchemax so they can take down Riot and all the corrupt symbiotes once and for all. They enter the building and are surrounded by tons of symbiotes. They fight them and push them into plastic machinery makers, killing them. By the way, Riot symbiotes army don't have hosts, they're just aliens, so it doesn't matter if they kill them. Miles eventually notices that the plastic machinery is about to explode, so he stays back to stop it while Agent Venom and Venom go fight Riot. Miles hands Harry the sound mixers so that the symbiotes are weakened. Venom and Agent Venom then proceed to fight Riot and are about to stop him until Phage comes in and helps Riot fight them. Riot tells Phage to distract them while he gets his plan in order. Venom and Agent Venom defeat Phage and look around the huge lab for Riot. They eventually stumble upon Agony and begin to fight her as well. Agony is defeated, but Riot is still missing. We cut back to Miles, who does a bunch of computer science to stop the plastics from exploding. He is seconds from shutting everything down until a red, white, and yellow symbiote confronts him. Silence arises and begins to fight Miles. Silence says that Miles never cared about her and that he just treats her as an annoying bug. Miles is confused until he realizes that Cindy Moon, his stepsister, is Silence. He fights her symbiote and manages to stop her. He pulls her out of the symbiote and says he's so sorry. Cindy says she didn't mean any of that and that the symbiote was controlling her thoughts, she thinks. Miles says she'll take her home, but Cindy says she's fine and that he doesn't have any time. Miles says no, but Cindy begs him to not go with her. She says she'll just call a taxi. Miles asks her if she's sure, and Cindy shakes her head yes. Miles hugs her and promises to do better. Cindy walks away, and Miles is luckily able to stop the plastic machinery from blowing up, and he also reduces the toxic air that is polluting New York. He then calls Harry and asks him where he's at. Harry says him and Eddie are looking for Riot. Miles says he'll be right down there. He swings down the lab and is hit mid in the air by a symbiote, which knocks him out. We cut to Riot, who is on the phone with his buyer, and he tells him that he has Spider-Man's blood, and that he will also give him a symbiote army in addition to Spider-Man's blood. The buyer says he's only paying for Spider-Man's blood and not the symbiote bullshit. Riot gets angry and ends the call. He then unleashes a mini rocket into the air, which will send him to the home of the symbiotes, so that way he can retrieve many more symbiotes to sell to potential buyers. Eddie and Harry use their symbiotic powers to stop the rocket ship from launching in the air. They then merge together to form one giant symbiote. Venom fights Riot and destroys him. Cindy Moon, who never left Alchemax, enters and begins taking pictures of everything. Venom asks her what she's doing there. She says she was inspired by Eddie Brock's article about Alchemax and that she wants to learn more about it. Venom says they gotta get her out of here. Riot, with his last strength, throws his symbiote dagger right at Cindy, stabbing her. Venom kills Riot, and the two Venoms unmerge. Harry says he'll get the girl to the hospital, while Eddie places the sound mixers everywhere. Eddie agrees, and Harry swings away. He places all the sound mixers around the building so that way all the symbiotes are destroyed. Eddie does that. Eddie leaves the area before the sound waves can commence. Eddie leaves the building and sees Miles Morales in the distance. Hey Miles, don't worry, me and Harry stopped Riot. Although a girl was injured in the process, but don't worry, Harry already took her to the hospital, Eddie says. Wait, what girl was injured? Miles replies. She was a young Asian girl who was taking pictures of Alchemax or something, Eddie says. Miles becomes angry. Why weren't you able to save her? He says. Dude, she's not dead, relax. She's been stabbed, but she'll make it out, she's fine, Eddie says. Miles then turns into a venomized version of himself. You don't deserve the symbiote. You have no idea what it's like to be a hero, he says. Eddie tries to talk him out of it, but a venomized Miles Morales begins to fight him. The two fight and a huge battle ensues. Eddie does everything he can, but he's just not as powerful enough. Harry enters the battle and tries to talk Miles out of it as well, but Miles doesn't listen. You've done enough damage to the city, Harry. I'm not going to let you do it ever again, Miles says. The two Venoms merge once again and take Miles on. Buildings are destroyed and lives are put at stake. They all continue to battle, but after a while, Venom finally wins. He takes the symbiote off Miles and destroys it. Miles says he's sorry and that so many voices were going through his head. Harry and Eddie find a symbiote-less Trevor Cole and take him to prison. Alchemax is exposed to the public, and J. Jonah offers Eddie a job. Eddie says no and hangs up the phone. The last part of the epilogue is Miles visiting Cindy at the hospital. She is in very critical condition, and the doctors don't think she'll make it. Miles asks the doctor what's holding her back. The doctor says that her cells aren't healing properly, and they aren't producing enough ATP for her to live. Miles does some science stuff and realizes that he can save her using his blood. Miles hates to risk it, but he was able to recreate a radioactive spider that gives her all the healing cells she needs to survive. Miles has the spider bite her, and she awakens from her coma. End credit 1. We open up to Liz Allen approaching someone. Here's the spider's blood, Liz says. The man looks at it and analyzes it carefully. Thank you, but I asked for the lizard. Negative, and the others as powers. Not this. Not just this, the man says. I'm sorry, but we're doing our best. The man shoots her. This will have to do for now, the man says. The light flashes onto him, and the man is revealed to be Jackal. End credit scene 2. We open up to Dr. Otto Octavius, who is now in good health and out of prison. We see him working on a large machine that could almost fit a person inside of it. He does some last-minute work on it, and he says, my project is complete. Now all I require is Spider-Man. I hope everyone enjoyed my pitch for the Venom solo game. I'm sorry for stuttering a little bit. I need to learn to quit talking fast. I'm also not going to just be making full story videos on this channel. I'm also going to be making other Marvel videos. I also like to make it clear that I only pitch the overall story for this Venom game and not the side quests or small missions. Like I said, this game would be around the same runtime as 2020's Spider-Man Miles Morales, which only featured 8 hours of main story. I would also like to mention that this game would feature 3 playable characters. Harry Osborn's Agent Venom, who would have not really guns, like actual guns that shoot bullets, but guns that would like shoot symbiote goo or something. And then the second playable character would be Eddie Brock's Venom. And the third one would just be Miles Morales. All 3 of them would have their own sets of skills and abilities, although Harry's and Eddie's might be a little bit similar, but overall they're different. I hope that everyone enjoyed the video, and who knows, I might even make a pitch for Spider-Man 3 because I have lots of ideas for that. Thanks for watching, and see you later.